Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and welcome to this week's Product People event. Before starting, please remember that you can watch the stream on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitch. Also, a reminder that this talk will be recorded and it'll be available on YouTube. So, if you want to share it afterwards with your fellow PMs, or just head out to YouTube to watch it, head to our channel and feel free to share. We will also have a Slido running for you to give us some insights and ask questions directly to the speaker. So feel free to enter this number and go to slido.com and enter this number or scan the QR code that you see on screen. So for today's talk, we're going to be talking about something really interesting. A PM, especially an interim PM, often needs to be a jack of all trades when it comes to product management tools. We've had to use a fair bit ourselves, so today's talk is going to be about two such tools, Jira and Linear. We'll talk about how they take different positions on process, with Jira leaving it up to the team, while Linear builds up an opinion in the tool. We'll also briefly compare the two and cover which tool fits which situation best in 2026. Before I get into it, I do want to briefly introduce myself. My name is Hamza Atique. I have, at this point, over 3 years of experience in product management and product ops, with a wide range of experience in B2B and B2C in various industries such as EdTech, DeathTech, and a lot more. So it's been a really, really fun ride. Let me tell you also a little bit about what we do at Product People, especially for those of you who are new here or just need a refresher. Our mission is to help companies discover and deliver great products faster. We do interim product management, empower product management community to share knowledge generously while managing the hands-on work of a product manager, a product owner, product ops, or product leaders on a fractional basis. We onboard fast, align teams, and deliver great outcomes thanks to our very skilled in-house team. We also curate free events just like this one for one of the biggest PM communities in Europe with over 60,000 members and growing. Before we move forward to the talk and I hand this over to our speaker for today, let's do a quick icebreaker before we start. Like I said earlier, you can open slido.com, enter the number you see on screen, or scan the QR code to let us know your thoughts. For people watching on other platforms, please feel free to share your answers in the comments and we will get back to you. So, for today, the icebreaker is, what's the real reason that most teams switch project management tools? The options are as follows. A, the old tool got too expensive. B, leadership wanted better reporting. C, the team just stopped trusting in the data. Or D, someone senior tried a new tool and liked it. I'm going to give everybody a bit just to get onto Slido and make that vote, or let us know in the comments if you're logging in from anywhere else. And in the meantime, maybe I could share my own experience here. So, at least in my experience, I feel like one of the leading reasons that people usually end up switching tools is because the old tool got a little too expensive. And that is usually because of certain licensing decisions that were made. Maybe it got out of hand. A lot of people have access. A lot of people who don't really need access have access. And the management of that old tool has become really, really difficult for the team. So they end up needing to switch and start from scratch. This often saves them a lot in terms of costs. And well, it gets them a clean slate as well. So I suppose the third option, option C, the team just stopped trusting the data in it, might also be a little bit accurate. That being said, for the most part, I feel like it's usually a matter of expense. And the reason that I think like that is because I believe that any tool is essentially useful in the right circumstances or based on what you're doing, right? So certain tools might be really good for road mapping, while other tools might be better to manage your day-to-day backlog. So it's really essential to figure out whether or not you've got the right tool, you've got the right fit. And then also, of course, it is important for any business to manage their costs accordingly. Well, I'm going to give you just a few seconds to drop your comments down, drop your option down, and let me know what you choose. Let's see, we have some answers flowing in. So let me just check those and let you know. It seems that 50% of the people who have voted so far, so this seems to be an interesting one because it is in stark contrast to my own experiences. But it seems that 50% of the people who voted so far have actually voted for option D, which is that someone senior tried a new tool and they liked it. Well, that isn't necessarily a bad one either, because I feel like anybody in the company who is trying new tools, figuring out what works, and spreading that around, as long as it is a validated approach and it is actually a tool that works, I think that that's fine. So that seems to be the experience that a lot of you have had. 25% of you so far have voted that the old tool got too expensive, and this again might be because of the reasons that we've talked about, or it might genuinely be because of price hikes. 25% of the rest of the voters that we see have also stated that leader have also stated that leadership just wanted better reporting. So I guess that is also something that is on the table. I feel like we've had a bunch of answers come into this poll, so we can move on here. But if you have any questions throughout the presentation, if you have anything to ask our speaker, feel free to drop it in on the Slido, and we will get back on that right at the end of the session. Before I hand it over, I just want to do a short intro of Hamza. Hamza Atique is an associate product management consultant at Product People with experience building B2B and B2C products across SaaS, EdTech, telecom, healthcare, maritime tech, and mobility. His work spans discovery, product strategy, user research, prototyping, lots of prototyping, positioning, and experimentation. He is especially interested in how product managers can use new tools, AI, no code, vibe coding, and other such stuff to test ideas faster, automate workflows, and move from ambiguity to validated product direction without waiting for the perfect conditions, which is exactly why Hamza is here to give us this talk today. Over to you, Hamza.
Thank you, Amna. Today we are talking about an interesting topic. It's Jira versus Linear. A lot of us product folks are already familiar with Jira, and then we've been hearing about Linear from perhaps our engineers, um, perhaps on Google, Reddit, etc., but we've never really used it. So this is kind of like a relatively more informal session where we're going through the tool. Um, we're going to talk about Linear more because most of us are already aware of Jira. So feel free to comment as well. It can be more of an interactive session as well. I'll be sharing most of my own opinions on what I feel like has happened, what I think from a consultant perspective. So it may or may not actually um, go with what your line of work is or what you're doing. Starting it off, um, most of us inherit a backlog we did not build. This is especially true if you join a company that has existed for a while or if a tool that has been working for a long time. You land on a project, you are handed a backlog. It might have hundreds, it might have thousands of open tickets. It has workflow schemes nobody remembers authoring, and at least one automation everybody is scared to switch off. Um, I want to separate two things right away. Jira is a genuinely capable tool. It can hold as many tickets, fields, automations as you create, no matter how complex your organization is, and it will do it reliably. That is not the problem. The problem is that nobody really owns the shape of the backlog or like the standardization that exists, that should exist for the company. And I think it's more so a process failure, and it can happen in any tool. Now, further digging into it, there are three essential layers to this. On the surface, you might have orphaned stories and tasks. Um, some of them have no author. Some of them were just created haphazardly. Maybe someone wanted to add details in the future. Um, or sometimes it's just a title and you're like, where's the description? What does it actually mean? Below that, you see that there are a lot of custom fields that nobody can really explain. You ask what a field is supposed to do or who is it for, and nobody can map it to anything in use. I've experienced this firsthand, where at one of our clients, we actually had three custom fields for story points, and nobody really knew which one was the main one. And when we joined, it was really funny how in one of the refinements we would use one story point field, and in some of them we would use the other. At the bottom is a spec that was accurate about 4 sprints ago when you initially got the plan approved. It might exist in Confluence or another documentation place, maybe Google Docs, maybe PowerPoint, but essentially nobody really updated it because updating it is genuinely a lot of work. Somewhere along the line, engineering suggested something else, and you had to make the necessary changes in the actual product, but not the actual spec plan. This is what age and neglect do to any tracker, to be honest. Linear will look exactly like this in 5 years, even 6 months, if nobody really tends to it. This is not a Jira defect. Now, for strategy and delivery, rarely share an address. Now, here's the gap I keep running into. Direction lives in one place, a deck, an internal platform, sometimes the company website, um, and the work lives somewhere else entirely. It lives in epics, it features and user stories, tickets, and sometimes initiatives. Um, Jira gives you the objects for both. It has initiatives. What it does not give you is any enforcement that the two connect. That link gets made once by someone and then it drifts. You created a lot of documentation on Confluence or on, um, let's say, the initiative, the epic level, but then slowly it just keeps getting different and different from what the actual implementation is becoming or the work that is being done. Now, that is the actual problem I want to talk about today, and that is a process problem before it is a tooling one. Now, Jira ships a configuration surface, while I feel like Linear ships more of a method. The Linear method is also published at this link in 11 practices. The analogy I keep coming back to is Android and iPhone. So both are excellent, but they disagree about how much the user should actually do or decide. Jira ships a configuration surface. Every team defines its own hierarchy, its own views. Support has one setup, the dev team has another. Product has another way of looking at it. It maps onto the largest teams, the enterprise, but then it can also work with the smallest of startups and companies. Now, that is genuinely a capability, um, but it is also maybe not the perfect fit for everyone. Sometimes you like Android for its customization, but you don't have the energy. Your team does not have the energy to go with it. Maybe sometimes you just need an iPhone that tells you what to do. Linear ships a method instead, essentially. They publish it openly, one hierarchy identical in every view, and you cannot really change it. You cannot customize it. Um, and that's what they propose. The opinion, the decision is the product. And for some teams, that is a constraint, and that's really problematic. But for others, maybe you can adapt to it, and maybe it just makes your life easier. Neither of them are actually correct. And I think similar to Android and iPhone or iOS, it's a matter of preference and how you actually do things. Now, let's talk about the linear method and why it works really well for agentic development. Now, linear has 11 practices published. I will cover six today, and the ones I feel like that changed most when agents enter the workflow. Mm, Starting with set the product direction. Now, in in Linear, when I was testing things up, I set up the whole workspace super easily with just two prompts to the Linear agent. Of course, this was a test, but it really showed me how easy it is to set up workspaces, especially if you're a new company or if you're recently shifting to Linear. Um, what I really like is that each of, let's say, the initiatives, I can set directions, very clear owners, priorities, target, projects, health. All of this, again, I can do with Jira. I can put in the effort to make it like that, but with Linear, it's just in the most important bits are already in your face, so you don't really need to do anything. um, and then we talk about prioritize enablers and blockers. Here's, let's say, a project update one of our team members posted for one of our demo spaces. Um, what I really liked about it is that it easily shows you where the project is at. Is it at risk? What is the risk? What has been happening in the past sprint? Which issues are past due? Which are the ones that matter the most? The point really is not that the update is well written or it's written. The point is that it lives right alongside the actual work that is being done. So anyone, whether it's like your management or someone from another team, they can click through and they can ask why an issue is a blocker without actually leaving the tool. And then you can also connect it to Slack to get notifications for project updates. And I think that just makes it much more easier. And then one of the things I've experienced firsthand is scoping projects down. Small projects finish, large ones become archaeology. Um, this is like one of the project view across the teams I've set up: health, target date, and completion. The behavior worth highlighting is milestone closure. The Jira pattern is 5 stories done, one still open, so the feature stays open. And then the epic stays open. And ultimately, the sprint is in a way incomplete. In Linear, when the issues under, let's say, a milestone closes, the milestone closes itself. And that is like a default you cannot configure away. And then that is like a trade off, perhaps, but then it also is, in a way, more smoother. Now, here is something that's been changing a lot recently, and this is something someone raised in a statement that I really liked, so I just added it here. And in that is write issues, not user stories. User stories existed for a good reason. Users could not always articulate what they needed, so the PM translated intent into something a developer could act on. That framework worked for a long time. But two things are changing now. Users are far more product literate now, especially Gen Z and beyond. They can describe a login flow or an edge case without needing translation, without need without using more generic terms that the PM would then need to translate. Um, of course, this is not the case for every project or every product. However, agents don't really benefit from this narrative framing. Sometimes they do, but AI is increasingly getting better and better. A story about a user is, if anything, more ambiguous to them. What they really need are explicit guardrails. They need constraints, they need controls, they need the expected result. This is just the direction I'm observing, not really a subtle fact. Teams writing good stories are not doing anything wrong, and I still think in many ways stories are really good. I need them a lot of the times. uh, this is probably like a thing that needs to be discussed in a session of itself, with a lot of product people just discussing, what is the future like, do we need to change anything. Is the agentic way of working now the new normal, or is it just part of the AI bubble? Here's like a matrix one of our team members raised, um, and it really got me thinking that um, that I have not really thought about before. The idea is that a ticket an agent can act on has to cover 6 dimensions. What, meaning data and entities retention, where, meaning infrastructure, residency, network, when, events, triggers, webhooks, who, RBs, RBAC, authorization, why, invariants, logic, and how, the stack, the React, Vue, Spring Boot, etc. I think this is something that's super interesting, and I really want to dive into it. But I'm also raising this for everyone who wants to read, who is inspired by it. You don't need to read every cell. You can just scan it and ask which of these you would ever put in a user story. You don't need to put all of them. Some teams would select some parts, some teams would select different parts. Now, on to, let's say, building with users. This is one part of Linear I really like. You can actually have a section for customers and what feedback customers are raising, um, what customer demand is. Um, and it's something that other tools do, for example, product board. And so what Linear does is implement a way of this, implement some capability of this. Now I can view, let's say, the projects I have, or um, how do you say it in Jira? Epics, epics and tasks or user stories. But interestingly, I can also see um, how, I think, yeah, I can also see the revenue for each of these customers. So let's say this product, fixed fare airport pricing, how much of this, how many customers are requesting this? I have 2 customers, and what is the priority for them? For them, it's like, for both of them, it's really high priority. And now I can connect it to, let's say, revenue. Um, Now, if, let's say, I delay this, I may be looking at a risk of affecting the 790,000 revenue I'm looking at per year. So this is a really interesting way you can connect both what the engineering team is doing with what our business goals are and what sales and marketing are doing. You can sort by how many customers are asking. Maybe you can sort by revenue, as it does here. The value is not the chart, it is the evidence that sits next to the work that you're doing. So it's not only that you're aware of the impact, but your developers can also look at this and they're like, this is why this project is so important for us. And they don't really have to rely on, let's say, someone else explaining it to them. Um, and then another thing is progress is visible by default. So health, target dates, updates are open to anyone in the workspace without really, siloing off information without requesting for access. The part I like most is that silence is also visible. So a project which has not really been updating any project updates, you can actually see that it has no updates. And then you can actually ask that person or that lead on what's going on and why is it not growing. um, yeah, and then at Product People we have this concept of transparency and accountability, and I think that should be something that is replicated in other clients as well. It's not something everyone would be comfortable with. Default visibility suits some organizational cultures, but it might not suit a lot of them. Now, one of the things maybe I can also share is the workspace we actually have. We are running at time, so I will quickly go over. Um, so here we have a demo workspace where we have initiatives essentially, which are epics. We have the description, a really short description. We have who's the owner. We can assign a lead team. Um, you can set the target date, how many projects are actually in it, and the health. You can click on it, you can see the properties, you can add documents. Here is generally where we would add initiative or epic level documents. You could also add any links, you could add Figma files. Um, and this is one of the parts I like the most, as I mentioned before, which is the product update, which actually keeps all of our stakeholders up to date on what's going on. And if, let's say, they have questions, they can actually comment. Why are these issues a blocker? And then anyone from the team, the PM, can respond. Your team can react. You don't need a separate tool. You don't need to perhaps, let's say, update them via Teams or email. They can check it out whenever they want to. Here's another view for all the projects in our workspace. Um, you can see the priority, the target date, which is one level down from the initiatives, and also the status. One of the things we do at one of our clients is also have AI evaluate the code and the PRs, and then perhaps push updates and let us know how much of what's the status of this, what if we need to update the target date, and if we need to update health. So having it integrated with, let's say, GitHub is also one of the plus points we notice. Then we have teams. For example, you could have one of the driver teams in this workspace. You could have any other teams, engineering, backend, knowledge, infrastructure. You have tickets for triage, issues, aka tickets. Um, Super easy to view, a lot more simplistic, not a lot of customization. And then you can also have cycles, which are essentially sprints. What is the team working on? What has it completed? And what was essentially in scope? Yeah, I think that's it. This was more so just um, letting people know who haven't checked out Linear before. Now, one of the things I do want to talk about is that Jira still wins in a lot of places. Jira is better off for service management and ITSM, for deep customization, for deep team specific customization. You can have regulated audit trails. It's really made to audit everything. And it has a really mature integration system. You don't really have to worry if about a tool not working with it or having a component that hasn't been worked on. It has Confluence. It has really good um, ways to conduct refinement, and a lot more other tools. So many that I don't think I've ever tried out myself. So if you're really looking for customization and a mature ecosystem, this is the right fit for you. Linear's real limits are that analytics are on higher plan, so you have to pay more. Time tracking might be a little difficult if it's not ingrained in the project updates and the culture. It's much more optimized for smaller and simpler teams. As I showed you, a lot of the things are not really customizable, they're just the way they are. So it's really nice if you don't want to think about it. But if you've already thought about your setup a lot, maybe you might need to check out Linear a lot more. It also resists bespoke processes. You can't come up with your entirely different process and then try to adjust it to Linear. You have to follow Linear's method of working, which is much more agile, much more simpler, and focuses more on actual engineering work instead of organizing. Now, how much of this is actually hype? I do feel like a lot of the Jira criticism we feel is often a setup problem. Teams are often overwhelmed or really excited about the high level of customization, and they do so much that the average team member really honestly feels overwhelmed. They don't want to get into it, they don't use half of the things, and it just takes so much more time than doing the actual productive work. Uh, the tool often is configured by someone who never really thought about how they could use it, and that is more so a governance failure as well. Now fix the configuration and implement Jira how you're thinking you would implement Linear, and maybe that resolves a lot of the problems. Second, enthusiasm for Linear is partly reaction as well. A lot of the people are tired of using Jira, and the way it's implemented, you might have some sort of resentment towards it as well. So when a new tool that is agentic first, that is AI native, that is made for 2026 comes up, you're like super excited and everyone just really wants to get their hands on it. So that is one of the things I feel like is also the case. And then third, uh, this is more cautious. Agile had exactly this wave: stories, epics, estimation, all pushed hard by consultancies with something to sell. Apply the same skepticism to claims about agentic tooling, and including the ones I have today. Um, Maybe in a year or two, your team is this agentic first setup. Maybe not. Maybe that's not exactly the future, and we still haven't found the right way. So, all of this, what we're doing is still up in the air, and it's something that you need to first get your hands on, experiment, and then come up with a decision. At the end, four things worth keeping. Again, the backlog problem is more so a process problem, something that was configured long before our time, maybe, and then we just never got around to fixing it. It accumulates under any tracker, any sort of time tracking or project management tool, Linear included, and changing tools will not fix it. So if you feel like this is your problem, just switching it to a different tool is not going to fix it unless you bring a very significant process change. The two tools disagree about who decides. Jira handles process design to each team and charges you in maintenance. Linear decides it for you and charges you in flexibility. Both again are like Android versus iOS, whichever you think is better for your setup. People are really excited about agents, but here's one thing: agents do raise the cost of a vague ticket. This is the thing that is actually new. What a ticket explains has moved from like a style preference for more from a more subjective or thing that's up to evaluation by the PM, um, and it now needs to be much more specific. If your tickets aren't adapted to this new agentic first setup, you are going to essentially raise the cost of the entire company, or maybe come up with more issues in understanding and incorrect implementations, because ultimately developers are now also using agents to understand issues, what's going on, what the PRD actually mentions. And lastly, it's similar to one: bring the method and not migration. Most clients will keep running Jira, and it is configurable enough to hold a structure. I think you should adapt what you're already running on, and then if it doesn't work, then you should shift to Linear. But make sure that you make the essential changes, the process changes, and the mindset changes before you shift. Because if you don't take care of it, Linear is going to become the new Jira, just less configurable. And I think that is it. Yeah, I hope I made sense. I'm sorry if I didn't recommend moving to Linear or staying on Jira. I think that's much so a decision for you. I just wanted to inspire everyone to think more.
Ooh, thank you so much, Hamza. That was one very insightful. I think one point that really hit home was very similar to life and many experiences in it. Be open to experiences, try new tools, and figure out what works for you, because not everything could work for you, but some things might work really well for you and your team. So, whether that's Jira, Linear, Miro, Figma, find your flavor, figure out what works for you. So, yeah, I think that's great advice in general. But thank you so much, Hamza, and thank you all for joining us. we are going to begin and move on to our question and answer session. Please feel free to go to our Slido and put all the questions you might have for our speaker in the chat over there. I'm going to give you some time to type in your questions, and in the meantime, I will briefly cover some of the main use cases where people normally use product people, and also just tell you a little bit about product people. So, in the meantime, everybody, please copy the number on screen, go to slido.com and paste that in, or just scan the QR code and drop in your questions. Cool. So, a few of the use cases that we end up covering are mentioned on screen, and I'm just going to go through them with you. So, firstly, we offer interim or fractional product support. This is when a company needs an experienced product manager or product leader for a limited period of time. For example, while hiring, covering parental leave, or pushing forward urgent initiatives. Secondly, coaching and advisory support. This is more about helping product teams or product leaders improve how they work through coaching, clearer processes, better product ops, or stronger performance routines. The third thing that we often do is product discovery support. So, this is when teams need help figuring out what to build next, validating opportunities, really diving straight in and diving deep into the discovery of things, researching users or markets, and shaping pilots or MVPs or even MLPs in some cases. So, we get our hands real nice and dirty with a lot of those issues, and we try to make sure that we can help your team come out of it and come out of it on top. We've worked with and continue to work with a number of B2B and B2C clients. On screen right now, you can see some of our B2C clients, including eBay, Tier, FreeNow, or DeepL. When it comes to B2B clients, we also work with a bunch of companies, some like the World Health Organization, Ometria, Sastrify, etc. And last but not least, we have supported over 690 cross functional teams and over 100 clients from Series A startups to publicly listed companies. We have 40 product leaders and product managers in house to deliver high quality services to our clients. And finally, something that we take great pride in, we have 59% women in the team, with 60% making up leadership roles, which I think is a great stat that I'm always super happy to share. Cool. So it looks like we already have some questions, and if any of you have a bunch more, keep free to keep dropping them in. And let me ask our speaker now. Cool. So Hamza, we have a few questions coming in. A few of them seem to be very closely related to your talk, so maybe there's a little bit of reiteration, but just let us know. First of all, what is your internal system to ensure your specs and Jira documentation are up to date? Do you have a system for this?
That is an interesting point. I have seen in a lot of cases that the there was no internal system. It was just manual effort that you had to update documentation if you updated it somewhere else. But one of the cool things with AI is that perhaps you can have a skill. Even with Linear, one thing I like is that if you make a change one place, you can ask Linear to let you know if there are any other places where this information might contradict what you're doing. And then that's what I've essentially been using to make sure the documentation is up to date everywhere.
Makes sense. Very similarly, I believe that Confluence, Jira, etc., also have a similar chatbot where you can at least look up like, hey, and I have not actively used this to groom my backlog or to make sure things are up to date, but it is really useful. So you can figure out, hey, I've made this change here. Where else do similar details occur or appear, so that you can change it there as well. So I think it is really cool that a lot of these tools are building in ways that you can make sure that everything is up to date. So yeah. One other fun thing that I like to do is just to have a cadence where I check in with my team and we go through all of the tickets available. Bit of a manual process. AI has definitely sped that up because you can always just, run these searches before those calls and then make sure that everything is up to date. Definitely still important to have your ceremonies in place, but they can be shorter, more efficient, all the good things.
Yep.
We have other questions too. So one of these is more of a general question. Um, so curious to know how you've incorporated AI in workflows, especially when it comes to product work. Anything like AI overviews of backlogs, etc., which is, I think, one of the points that you did mention. But let us know how else you've incorporated it.
Yeah, I think um, AI is essentially in a lot of places now. In many ways, it has improved the way we've worked. Um, so one of the things I really like are Claude routines. So perhaps your Claude routine can run every morning or every 2 or 3 times a week. And it brings up all the information. It goes through, let's say, linear, your backlog, and it identifies anything that needs cleaning up. If you feel like there is a project that is um, not on track, where you feel like where perhaps the AI feels like there hasn't been a lot of updates or movement in the last couple of days, it can bring that up. So that's one of the things that's helped me keep track of everything much more faster instead of me having to manually go through each issue or project and see what the engineers are themselves doing. Um, and then a, a lot of the times, especially if you have a very big team, what you can do is have routines for project updates. So essentially, AI reads through the updates that your engineering team is doing, and then it resurfaces that as like a progress update for you. It can post that as a status update, like I showed in this demo. So that's one of the two things. I think a lot of it is mainly just keeping everyone up to date and making sure nothing is being left behind.
Makes sense and agreed. I feel like AI has definitely um it's sort of seeped into a bunch of areas in a bunch of different fields of work. I think that definitely there are ways that it can simplify a lot of things, especially when it comes to collecting context, rather than going through really hefty documentations or going through all of those tickets. Just to have that in one place. And then also a lot of these tools are generally also able to integrate with Slack or whatever workspace you use, so some of that work can be automated off of your hands. Use it smartly. Make sure that you are also just vetting everything that is being sent out, folks. But AI is definitely a tool that can simplify your lives immensely. So yeah. So if a client is stuck on a tool, do you think it is possible to bring? Uh, do you think it is possible bringing the method without the migration of tools?
That is an interesting question. Um, yes, I think in a way you can do that. This is something I've seen at a client. Let me know if it doesn't make sense. But I think what you essentially really need to do is sit down and define what needs to move and what doesn't. You need to essentially um, come up with the process, come up with all the ways it can migrate. And wait, I think I read it the wrong way, without the migration of tools. So
Yeah.
you're essentially still staying in Jira, right?
Or whatever tool you're currently using. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think you can still do it. So what Linear did was that it brought like this method that tries to streamline and solve a lot of the problems we faced by Jira, having so much that it becomes a separate job in itself. I think you can take inspiration and think from a user perspective. A lot of the times, Jira is set up from someone who will not use Jira long term, or will not be involved with your team as much. So I think that's really important in using any tool. Yeah.
Agreed. I have been part of, in previous roles and things, I've been part of Jira overhauls and revamps where we have basically set everything up from scratch. Some of the things that I've learned there is I think that people often overcomplicate their setups of tools whenever they're starting out. One example that really resonated from when you were talking was also how there are a bunch of fields that nobody really knows what they're for, or nobody really knows whether or not they need to be populated. But I feel like it's a disconnect from the setup itself versus what you actually need. So it's best if you set up your space in whatever tool you're using, that is absolutely relevant to the needs of your team. Make sure that you're covering things that are required, but also don't overcomplicate it. And I think that you should be good. The more complex that you make these things, the harder it'll be to come back and change them one day. And you'll probably need to end up overhauling them. That being said, think it through and you'll still be able to do it. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. And our final question for now that has come in is, have you ever had pushback from a client team that was trained for years to write user stories? Which is interesting, judging by how, like, the way that people prefer user stories is changing, the way that people are writing user stories is changing. So that's a fun one.
Yeah, I think this is also connected mostly to a culture of resisting change. Maybe someone has like a different argument for this, but what I've seen is that generally the companies that have been most resistant to, let's say, linear or agentic workflows, or even just incorporating AI a little bit, are generally the ones that have existed for a long time or have a culture to not bring in new things or make their lives tougher. I think in that sense, it's really important to let them know the rationale behind it. A lot of the times we know what we're doing, but the engineering manager or your front end engineer doesn't really know why you're doing this, and they're perfectly fine with the old workflow. In that sense, I think you really need to explain why you're doing this, what are the benefits, and then maybe it's important to understand their side of the story, and maybe you might come to a compromise. Maybe you still add a user story, or maybe you use Gherkin acceptance criteria, but then maybe you have a new workflow for pushing changes or reviewing them. I think I think this is like a universal thing. Communication is important. You should do it.
100%. Okay. It looks like somebody is also curious, since at the start we mentioned that you do prototyping, a lot of prototyping. So we also just have a question coming in, and it's more of a general one. But what prototyping tools do you dabble in?
Um, since last year when prototyping or like vibe coding became a thing, I've done it a lot. I've used so many tools. I have used Lovable, I have used Bolt, I have used Replit and Windsurf and Cursor. But I think the best one right now are the two top ones. That is Claude Code and um, Codex, because they are directly connected to the companies that provide the LLMs. They are able to implement changes, better changes, optimize better. Um, they have a lot of customization, but the biggest thing, especially if you use them a lot, is they offer way more uh, usage limits for the same price you're going to find in other tools. Um, and I feel like if you find something cool in another tool, you should try to find out what exactly it is, and then you can exactly replicate that in Cloud Code with a skill or a plugin. So these two tools I think are the best.
Got it. I feel like also, and this is coming from a lot of my friends who have vibe coded things, but they're not tech savvy at all and they're not working in tech. But they also really seemed like lovable. I feel like it's just a much simpler, less intimidating user interface. So if anybody's just getting started or wants to mess around, that's also one you could likely try.
Yeah, that's true. For example, if you have, let's say, you just need to create a front end prototype, I think Lovable is great. If you're not used to Cloud Code, I think Lovable is a great way to create simple stuff you want to demo to people. But if you actually want to build something, I think you should work towards Cloud Code or Codex.
Perfect. Thank you, Hamza. I think that that is all of the questions that we'll take right now. But that being said, if anybody has more questions, feel free to drop them in the comments and whatnot, and we will get back to you on those. But for now, that's all the questions that we'll be taking. So thank you for your questions, and thank you, Hamza, for your answers. That will be all for today. We'd also like to mention that we are hiring and have the APM and PM roles open. So you can apply by scanning the QR code on the screen. I would also really like to invite you to subscribe to our newsletter where we share insights and experiences that we gained during missions, clients, and also, in previous roles. So we love to share more knowledge with all of you and would love if you subscribe. Also, make sure you join us next week when we talk about why a lot of the concepts that were once relevant purely in finance and to finance teams are actually becoming every product leader's responsibility. Join us next week for the talk, and thank you so much.